Jamaal Washington stands at the entrance of the grand ballroom of the Ritz-Carlton. He observes his former classmates who once tormented him, now unaware of his $100 million net worth. His hand tightens around the envelope containing evidence that could destroy Darnell Fletcher, the ringleader who ruined his life. A waiter approaches with champagne. Before we dive into this incredible story of redemption and justice, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Drop a like if you've ever wanted to prove someone wrong who underestimated you, and hit subscribe to join our community of storytellers. Now, let's journey back to where it all began. Westlake Academy stood like a fortress of privilege on the outskirts of Atlanta, Georgia. Its manicured lawns and colonial architecture screamed old money and established power. For most students, the campus represented opportunity and assured success. For Jamaal Washington, it was a daily battleground. As the only black scholarship student from what his classmates called the wrong side of town, Jamaal faced an uphill battle from his first day. He had earned his place through academic excellence, winning a competitive scholarship meant to diversify the predominantly white student body. But instead of finding acceptance, he discovered that grades alone couldn't overcome the invisible barriers of race and class. "Mr. Washington, are you sure you understood the assignment?" Mrs. Caldwell, his English teacher, would ask whenever he submitted work that didn't fit her preconceptions, even though his essays consistently showed depth and originality that surpassed his peers. "Perhaps you'd be more comfortable at a different school," the guidance counselor suggested after Jamaal reported racial slurs written on his locker. The incident was dismissed as a prank without investigation. But no one embodied the toxic environment more than Darnell Fletcher. The son of Bradley Fletcher, a powerful real estate developer who had donated the school's new gymnasium, Darnell moved through Westlake Academy with the absolute confidence of someone who had never faced consequences for his actions. "Hey, scholarship, did your mom clean my house yesterday?" Darnell would call out as Jamaal walked past his circle of laughing friends. "She did a terrible job on the bathroom." Jamaal's mother, LaShonda Washington, worked 3 jobs to keep their small apartment and provide for his education expenses not covered by the scholarship. Cleaning houses was indeed one of them, though never for the Fletchers. The crude remarks cut deep, but Jamaal had promised his mother he would endure. Education was their shared dream, the path to breaking cycles of poverty that had constrained their family for generations. The exclusion was systematic and relentless. Study groups would suddenly change meeting locations without informing him. Lab partners would request reassignment. Lunch tables would mysteriously fill up when he approached. "It's not about race," Tiffany Adams, the student council president, insisted when Jamaal raised concerns about being the only senior not informed about college application workshops. "You probably just got overlooked." But being overlooked happened with suspicious regularity, and the racial undertones were impossible to ignore. When Jamaal scored highest on the calculus midterm, rumors spread that he must have cheated. When he was selected for the debate team, whispers suggested it was just affirmative action. The science fair during junior year should have been Jamaal's moment of triumph. He had developed an innovative water filtration system using locally available materials that could help communities like his own neighborhood, where water quality concerns were routinely ignored by city officials. The project represented months of research and experimentation, conducted in the evenings after helping his mother with her work. The night before the fair, Jamaal stayed late at school to perfect his presentation. He had stored his project in the science lab with permission from Mr. Harrington, the one teacher who recognized his potential. When he arrived the next morning, he found his display table empty, his prototype missing, and his research notes soaked in water. Custodian probably thought it was trash, Darnell suggested with a smirk when Jamaal desperately searched for his project. Can't blame him. It looked like something from the junkyard. Without his project, Jamaal couldn't compete. The science fair winner would receive a special scholarship consideration at Georgia Tech, an opportunity that would have eased his family's financial burden. Instead, the honor went to Bradley Wellington, Darnell's best friend, whose father sat on the board of trustees. Mr. Harrington filed a formal complaint, insisting that Jamal's project had been deliberately sabotaged. The administration promised an investigation that never materialized. When Jamal's mother tried to follow up, her calls went unreturned. "Just focus on graduating," she told Jamal, her voice tired but determined. "Don't let them win by giving up." But the prom incident nearly broke him. After weeks of gathering courage, Jamal had asked Zoe Henderson to be his date. Zoe, unlike most of her peers, had shown him basic kindness, occasionally partnering with him in French class. To his surprise, she had said yes. 3 days before prom, Jamal received a text from Zoe canceling their plans. Hours later, a group chat was accidentally shared with him, revealing the cruel truth. Darnell and his friends had dared Zoe to accept Jamal's invitation, planning to film her abandoning him at the dance for a staged emergency. The screenshots of their laughter and the dehumanizing language they used to describe him left Jamal physically ill. He didn't attend prom. Instead, he worked an extra shift at the convenience store where he worked weekends, swallowing his humiliation and channeling it into determination. Graduation day arrived with a mixture of relief and lingering bitterness. As Jamal crossed the stage to receive his diploma, the applause was noticeably softer than for other students. He looked out at the audience and saw his mother standing alone, clapping with fierce pride, tears streaming down her face. "You did it, baby," she whispered when he found her after the ceremony. "You showed them all." But Darnell Fletcher wasn't finished. At the graduation party hosted by the school, he cornered Jamal near the refreshment table. "Good luck out there, scholarship," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "Some of us are headed to Ivy League schools with our parents' connections, and some of us, well, I hear the local gas station is hiring full-time." Jamal looked him directly in the eyes, a slow, deliberate gaze that momentarily unsettled Darnell. "I'll see you in 5 years," Jamal said quietly. "And you won't recognize my life." It wasn't a threat. It was a promise, to himself, to his mother, and to every person who had ever been underestimated because of their race or background. As he walked away from Westlake Academy for the last time, Jamal made a silent vow that success would be his response to every act of prejudice he had endured. What he couldn't have known then was exactly how spectacular that success would be. The transition from Westlake Academy to the real world hit Jamal like a cold shower. Despite graduating with honors, the prestigious college acceptances he had worked for came with insufficient financial aid. The stark reality of educational economics forced him to decline his spot at Northwestern and enroll at Atlanta Metropolitan State College instead. "It's just temporary," he assured his mother as they reviewed his class schedule. "I'll transfer after saving some money." Their small apartment felt both comforting and confining after the sprawling campus of Westlake. Jamal's room doubled as their dining area, his desk folding away when they needed to eat. But it was here, in this modest space, that he began to conceptualize the idea that would eventually transform urban transportation. By day, Jamal attended classes, learning the fundamentals of computer science and business administration. By night, he worked as a delivery driver, navigating Atlanta's complex transportation landscape. On weekends, he picked up shifts at a call center, handling customer service for a major telecommunications company. Every spare moment in between was dedicated to teaching himself advanced programming languages through free online resources. "You're going to burn yourself out," warned his friend Dexter Hopkins, who had graduated from the public high school in their neighborhood. "Nobody can keep up this pace." But Jamal wasn't just working for a paycheck. Every frustrating traffic jam, every late bus, every customer complaint about service unavailability in certain neighborhoods fed into his growing vision. He began mapping transportation deserts, areas where residents, primarily people of color, lacked reliable public transit options despite dependence on these services. "The problem isn't just inconvenience," he explained to Dexter while they shared a quick lunch between classes. "It's economic exclusion. How can people access jobs, education, or healthcare when they can't even get across town affordably?" His first attempt to secure funding came 6 months after he began sketching his concept for an app that would integrate existing transportation options with community-based solutions. He prepared meticulously for the meeting with a local business incubator, developing detailed projections and a working prototype. "Your technical skills are impressive," the program director admitted after his presentation. "But we're looking for more established entrepreneurs. Perhaps gain some experience working for a tech company first." The subtext was clear in the way the man's eyes never quite met his, how he repeatedly checked the credentials on Jamaal's application as if expecting to find a discrepancy. A black kid from South Atlanta didn't fit their profile of a tech founder, regardless of his qualifications. 4 banks declined his business loan applications. 2 angel investors scheduled meetings only to cancel at the last minute. A pitch competition ranked him highly on technical merit but gave the funding to a team developing yet another food delivery service. The pattern became painfully familiar: enthusiastic responses to his written proposals followed by visible surprise during in-person meetings, then polite rejection letters citing lack of industry experience or limited market viability. "They can't see past my skin color to recognize what this could become," Jamaal confided to his mother after a particularly demoralizing rejection. "They talk about innovation but only want to fund people who look like them." LaShonda Washington, who had been fighting similar battles her entire life, took his hands in hers. "Then you need to find someone who sees you clearly." That person arrived unexpectedly on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. Jamaal was presenting his concept at a small tech meetup hosted at the community college, an event so minor he had almost skipped it to pick up an extra work shift. The attendance was sparse, but among the handful of people was Terrence Hamilton, a successful entrepreneur who had built a cybersecurity firm from scratch and sold it for millions. Unlike other potential investors, Terrence didn't begin with questions about Jamaal's background or education. Instead, he focused entirely on the problem being solved. "Walk me through how this would work for a single mother with 2 jobs and no car," he requested, his interest genuine and immediate. For the next hour, they discussed specific use cases, technical challenges, and scaling strategies. Terrence poked holes in assumptions, suggested refinements, and pushed Jamaal's thinking further. By the end of their conversation, Jamaal felt intellectually challenged rather than personally judged, a refreshing change. "You've identified a real problem and a viable solution," Terrence concluded. "But more importantly, you understand these communities because you live this reality. That's an advantage, not a liability." 2 days later, Terrence offered to become Jamaal's mentor and made an initial investment of $75,000 in exchange for a small equity stake. It wasn't enormous by startup standards, but it was enough for Jamaal to reduce his work hours and focus on development. With Terrence's guidance, Jamaal refined his business model. The app, initially called Transit Bridge, evolved into Urban Mobility, a platform that combined traditional ride-sharing with innovative community-based solutions like volunteer driver networks, carpool matching for regular commutes, and integration with existing public transit. The key difference from other transportation apps was its focus on affordability and accessibility in underserved areas. Revenue would come from partnerships with employers, healthcare providers, and educational institutions who would subsidize transportation for their workers, patients, and students. Transportation isn't just about moving people from point A to point B, Jamaal explained during their strategy sessions. It's about connecting communities to opportunities. Progress was steady but challenging. Jamaal assembled a small team of developers who shared his vision, working from a cramped office space in a repurposed warehouse. Late nights of coding blended into early mornings of pitching to potential partners. For every success, there were multiple setbacks. Then came the apparent breakthrough. A major urban development conference selected Urban Mobility as a finalist for their innovation showcase. The exposure led to a meeting with representatives from Fletcher Development Group, Darnell's father's company, who expressed interest in incorporating the technology into their newest mixed-income housing project. "This could be transformative for the communities we serve," said the project manager, seemingly impressed with the presentation Jamaal and his team had prepared. 2 weeks later, Jamaal discovered through industry contacts that Fletcher Development had begun developing a suspiciously similar platform called Community Connect. Further investigation revealed they had filed a patent application with features identical to Urbamobility's proprietary algorithms. "They're trying to steal your concept," Terrence confirmed after reviewing the information. "They probably never intended to partner with you, just mine your ideas." The attempted theft could have been devastating, but Jamaal's meticulous documentation of his development process provided critical protection. With Terrence's connections, they secured an emergency meeting with patent attorneys who filed immediate challenges. The legal battle was brief but intense. Fletcher Development, caught in a blatant intellectual property theft attempt, quietly withdrew their application when presented with evidence of Jamaal's prior work. The incident, though stressful, had an unexpected benefit. It caught the attention of genuine investors. If Fletcher wanted it badly enough to steal it, it must be valuable, reasoned Santiago Velez, a partner at Horizon Ventures, a firm specializing in urban innovation. "We'd rather invest in the authentic creator." Horizon's investment of $2 million provided the capital needed to launch Urbamobility in its first test market, South Atlanta, the very neighborhood where Jamaal had grown up. The symmetry wasn't lost on him as he personally onboarded the first community drivers, many of whom were longtime residents who had witnessed his journey from a distance. "Always knew you'd do something special," Mrs. Jenkins, his former neighbor, told him after completing her training as a part-time driver. "Just didn't know you'd bring the opportunity back home with you." The pilot program exceeded all projections. Ridership grew exponentially as word spread about the reliable, affordable service. Employment rates in connected neighborhoods showed measurable improvement as transportation barriers diminished. Healthcare facilities reported decreased appointment cancellations. Local businesses experienced increased foot traffic. The data told a compelling story, one that larger investors could no longer ignore. As Urbamobility prepared for expansion to additional cities, Jamaal Washington was no longer the overlooked scholarship kid. He had become a founder whose vision commanded attention, and substantial funding. The struggle years had formed him, but they hadn't defined him. What Darnell Fletcher and his Westlake Academy peers could never understand was that their attempts to exclude Jamaal had only strengthened his determination to create systems of inclusion. Their rejection had fueled his drive to build acceptance. Their dismissal had inspired his commitment to recognition. And that commitment was about to be tested in ways he couldn't have anticipated. From the converted warehouse where Urbamobility began, Jamaal Washington moved his growing company to a modern office space in downtown Atlanta. The glass-walled conference room offered a panoramic view of the city whose transportation landscape they were revolutionizing, a daily reminder of both progress and purpose. "We're not just building an app," Jamaal emphasized during the company's first all-hands meeting in their new headquarters. "We're building mobility equity." This philosophy informed every aspect of Urbamobility's development. As the company expanded from Atlanta to Birmingham, then Memphis, Jacksonville, and beyond, Jamaal insisted on maintaining the community-centered approach that distinguished their platform. Each new city launch began with extensive outreach to neighborhood organizations, churches, and local businesses to ensure the service addressed specific regional needs. The corporate culture Jamaal cultivated stood in stark contrast to the exclusionary environment he had experienced at Westlake Academy. Urbamobility's hiring practices prioritized diversity at all levels, from entry-level customer support to senior leadership. Jamaal took particular pride in their apprenticeship program, which provided technology training and employment pathways for residents from underserved communities. "Your team doesn't look like most tech companies I visit," observed a reporter from TechCrunch during an office tour for a feature article. "That's because most tech companies are missing out on extraordinary talent by fishing in the same small pond," Jamaal replied. "We cast a wider net." This approach wasn't just socially responsible, it proved remarkably effective. Urbamobility's diverse perspectives led to innovations that competitors missed, particularly in addressing the needs of communities traditionally overlooked by technology companies. Their user base grew more diverse than industry averages, and customer loyalty metrics consistently outperformed competitors. The road to success, however, remained challenging. When urban mobility sought Series B funding to scale nationally, Jamaal encountered familiar barriers. During a pitch meeting with a prestigious Silicon Valley venture capital firm, one partner interrupted his presentation to ask, "Who developed the actual technology?" "We'd like to speak with your CTO." "You're speaking to him," Jamaal responded calmly, despite the familiar sting of assumptions about black entrepreneurs. "I wrote the original code base and still oversee our technical architecture." These incidents occurred with decreasing frequency as urban mobility's success became undeniable, but they never disappeared entirely. Jamaal learned to navigate them with a strategic patience that belied his internal frustration. Each slight became fuel for further excellence rather than a source of discouragement. By the 3-year mark, urban mobility had expanded to 15 cities and secured partnerships with major healthcare systems, educational institutions, and employers who subsidized transportation for patients, students, and workers. The company's valuation reached $50 million, then quickly doubled as their impact data demonstrated conclusive improvements in employment rates, healthcare access, and economic activity in connected communities. As the company grew, Jamaal made a conscious decision to maintain a relatively low public profile. He granted select interviews to industry publications and appeared at transportation conferences, but avoided the spotlight-seeking behavior typical of many successful founders. His focus remained on building the company rather than building his personal brand. "The work speaks for itself," he told Terrence Hamilton, who had transitioned from mentor to board member as the company matured. "I don't need my face on magazine covers." This deliberate approach to privacy had an unexpected benefit. Most people outside the transportation technology sector remained unaware of urban mobility's founder. Jamaal could walk through most places without recognition, observing how people used his technology without the knowledge that they were in the presence of its creator. Despite his growing wealth, Jamaal lived modestly compared to many entrepreneurs of similar success. He purchased a comfortable home for his mother in a safe neighborhood with excellent healthcare access, insisting she finally retire from the multiple jobs that had supported them for years. For himself, he chose a modern apartment within walking distance of urban mobility's headquarters, and drove the same reliable sedan he had purchased after their first round of funding. "You could afford any car you want," his CFO pointed out after closing a particularly lucrative partnership deal. "Why not upgrade?" "This one gets me where I need to go," Jamaal replied with a shrug. Isn't that the whole point of transportation? What truly excited him wasn't personal luxury but the opportunity to create lasting impact. As urban mobility flourished, Jamaal established the Washington Mobility Foundation, which provided scholarships for students from low-income communities pursuing degrees in transportation planning, urban design, and technology. The foundation also funded research into transportation equity and invested in infrastructure improvements in underserved neighborhoods. Each scholarship recipient received not just financial support but mentorship and internship opportunities. Jamaal personally met with every new cohort, sharing his journey and the vision that drove his work. These sessions were among his most rewarding professional experiences, particularly when students shared stories of overcoming barriers similar to those he had faced. "You've created something truly transformative," remarked Dr. Alicia Chen, a transportation equity researcher whose work the foundation supported. "Most successful entrepreneurs solve problems for people like themselves. You've built solutions for communities that technology typically ignores." As urban mobility approached its 4th anniversary, industry recognition mounted. The company won innovation awards, featured prominently in case studies at business schools, and attracted acquisition offers from larger technology firms. Jamaal declined these offers, preferring to maintain the company's independence and mission-driven approach. A profile in Forbes finally broke through his relative anonymity, highlighting urban mobility's dramatic growth and featuring Jamaal on their 30 Under 30 list. The article detailed the company's journey from scrappy startup to industry leader valued at over $100 million, with Jamaal as its majority shareholder. It was this article that eventually caught the attention of his former classmates. One evening while reviewing partnership proposals, Jamaal received a notification from Facebook, a platform he rarely used. Tiffany Adams, the former student council president from Westlake Academy, had added him to a group titled Westlake Class of 2018, 5-Year Reunion. Curiosity prompted him to scroll through the group discussions. The planned event seemed standard, a weekend gathering at the Ritz-Carlton in downtown Atlanta, with a formal dinner, cocktail reception, and various activities designed to showcase alumni achievements. What caught his attention were the comments from Darnell Fletcher. "Can't wait to see who's actually successful and who's still trying to find themselves," Darnell had written, followed by laughing emojis. "Some predictions are too easy." Further comments revealed Darnell's continued arrogance. He boasted about his position at his father's company, the connections he had made at Princeton, and his newly purchased luxury condo. More disturbing were the subtle racial undertones in his remarks about other classmates, particularly those who had attended historically black colleges and universities. Jamaal was about to close the page, having no interest in revisiting those painful memories, when a direct message appeared from Darnell himself. "Hey Scholarship, noticed you haven't RSVP'd to the reunion. Too embarrassed to show your face? Don't worry, we set the ticket price on a sliding scale for those who couldn't hack it in the real world. I'm sure we can find some busboy positions if you want to attend that way instead." The message landed like a physical blow, instantly transporting Jamaal back to the hallways of Westlake Academy. The familiar mixture of anger, hurt, and determination rose within him, but this time, from a position of strength rather than vulnerability. For the first time, Jamaal considered attending the reunion. The Facebook message from Darnell was just the beginning. 3 days later, a personalized email arrived in Jamaal's inbox with the subject line, "Special invitation to Westlake Academy's 5-year reunion, don't miss your chance to network." "Dear Jamaal," the email began with false warmth. "As head of the reunion committee, I wanted to personally extend an invitation to our upcoming celebration. While most of our classmates have achieved remarkable success in their careers, we understand that not everyone's path follows the same trajectory. We've created special networking opportunities for those still establishing themselves professionally. Consider this a chance to connect with more successful alumni who might offer guidance or even employment opportunities. The catering staff has already been hired, so unfortunately, we can't offer work at the event itself." The message was signed simply, Darnell Fletcher, Senior Vice President, Fletcher Development Group. Jamaal read the email twice, his initial anger giving way to something more calculated. The thinly veiled condescension was clearly meant to either ensure his absence or set him up for humiliation if he attended. What Darnell couldn't know was how dramatically the power dynamic had shifted. "Interesting approach to alumni relations," Jamaal murmured, taking a screenshot of the email before archiving it. His curiosity piqued, Jamaal began researching the current status of his former classmates, particularly Darnell. What he discovered was revealing. While Darnell's social media portrayed a life of luxury and professional success, industry publications told a different story. Fletcher Development Group had experienced significant setbacks in recent years, with several projects stalled due to financing issues and complaints about discriminatory housing practices. Darnell's position as Senior Vice President appeared to be largely ceremonial, a title granted by his father rather than earned through accomplishment. Recent business journals noted that Bradley Fletcher was desperately seeking new investors after several high-profile partners had withdrawn from joint ventures. The reunion isn't just a social event for him, Jamaal realized. It's a networking opportunity he needs. This understanding shifted Jamaal's perspective on the invitation. What had initially seemed like another attempt at humiliation now looked like a potential moment of reckoning. Yet the question remained, would attending serve any purpose beyond petty revenge? That evening, Jamaal visited his mother for their weekly dinner. As they shared a meal in her comfortable new dining room, a far cry from the folding table in their old apartment, he described the invitation and his conflicted feelings. "Part of me wants to show up in the most expensive suit I can find, arrive in a luxury car, and watch their faces when they realize who I've become," he admitted. "But another part thinks I should just ignore them completely. They don't deserve even a moment of my time. LaShonda Washington listened thoughtfully while serving second helpings of her famous sweet potato casserole. "The question isn't what they deserve," she finally said. "It's about what serves your peace. Revenge might feel good for a moment, but what happens after that moment passes?" "So you think I shouldn't go?" Jamaal asked. "I didn't say that," she replied, her expression knowing. "Sometimes, addressing the past is necessary to fully step into your future. But there's a difference between seeking revenge and seeking resolution." Her wisdom, as always, gave him perspective. Later that week, Jamaal scheduled lunch with Terrence Hamilton to discuss the situation. They met at a quiet restaurant near Urban Mobility's headquarters, where Jamaal shared both the invitation and his research on Fletcher Development's current struggles. "Interesting timing," Terrence observed after reviewing the information. "Your former bully needs connections, and suddenly he's organizing a reunion." "Exactly," Jamaal agreed. "But I'm not sure what attending would accomplish beyond momentary satisfaction." Terrence considered this thoughtfully. "What if satisfaction isn't the only possible outcome? You've built a company that addresses systemic inequities. Your former classmate represents the kind of thinking that perpetuates those inequities. Perhaps there's an opportunity here beyond personal vindication." "What kind of opportunity?" "I've heard rumors about Fletcher Development's business practices," Terrence explained. "Discriminatory lending, predatory development in vulnerable neighborhoods, pushing out long-term residents through questionable means. If those rumors have substance, perhaps your attendance could serve a larger purpose than simply proving him wrong about you." This perspective resonated with Jamaal. He had built Urban Mobility not just to succeed personally but to create positive change in communities like the one where he grew up. If Fletcher Development was indeed engaging in harmful practices, addressing that harm aligned with his broader mission. "I need more information before I decide," Jamaal concluded. In the following weeks, Jamaal quietly authorized a thorough but legal investigation into Fletcher Development Group's business practices. The findings confirmed Terrence's suspicions and revealed additional concerns. The company had repeatedly violated fair housing regulations, been cited for unsafe labor conditions at construction sites, and used legal loopholes to evade environmental requirements in predominantly black neighborhoods. Most disturbing was evidence suggesting Darnell personally led initiatives to artificially inflate property values in gentrifying areas, directly contributing to the displacement of long-term residents, many from communities similar to where Jamaal had grown up. These discoveries transformed Jamaal's decision-making process. Attending the reunion was no longer about personal vindication but about accountability for practices that harmed vulnerable communities. With this clarity of purpose, he RSVP'd to the reunion with a brief, professional message giving no indication of his current status. As the event approached, Jamaal methodically prepared his approach. He consulted with legal experts about the evidence gathered on Fletcher Development. He arranged for discreet access to the venue ahead of the event. He selected an understated but impeccably tailored suit that signaled success without ostentation. Most importantly, he prepared mentally for the encounter, working with his therapist to process lingering emotions from his high school experience. "The goal isn't to hurt him as he hurt you," his therapist reminded him. "It's to ensure that the harm stops with you rather than continuing to others." The night before the reunion, Jamaal sat in his office late into the evening, reviewing his plan one final time. On his desk sat the formal invitation, Darnell's condescending email, and a folder containing evidence of Fletcher Development's discriminatory practices. Beside these items was a framed photo of his mother at his college graduation, her pride a reminder of what truly mattered in his journey. What do you think Jamaal should do at the reunion? Comment number 1 if you think he should publicly expose Darnell's discriminatory business practices in front of everyone. Comment number 2 if you believe he should have a private conversation with Darnell first, giving him a chance to make things right. Drop a like if you've ever had to confront someone from your past who underestimated you, and hit subscribe to follow Jamaal's journey toward justice. How would you handle coming face to face with someone who bullied you after achieving massive success? Let's continue this story and see what happens next. The morning of the reunion, Jamaal woke before his alarm. A sense of resolute calm had replaced the initial emotional turbulence triggered by Darnell's invitation. This wasn't about revenge anymore, it was about addressing a past that had shaped him while preventing others from suffering similar discrimination. His first call was to Maya Jenkins, his executive assistant and one of Urban Mobility's earliest employees. Maya had grown up in the same neighborhood as Jamaal and understood intuitively what this confrontation represented. "Everything's arranged at the Ritz-Carlton," she confirmed. "I've coordinated with their events team, and they're aware you'll need private access to the venue before the main event. They believe it's for a surprise presentation about your foundation's new scholarship program." "Perfect," Jamaal replied. "And the documentation?" "All prepared according to specifications. The legal team reviewed everything twice to ensure we're on solid ground. Nothing in the materials could be considered defamatory since it's all factually verified." While this preparation continued, Jamaal wasn't aware that he had already changed the dynamics of the evening in a significant way. 3 months earlier, through a shell company managed by his investment advisors, Jamaal had purchased the very hotel where the reunion would take place. The acquisition wasn't motivated by the upcoming event, it was part of a broader investment strategy focused on properties where Urban Mobility could implement employment programs for residents from underserved communities. The coincidence of the reunion being held at his newly acquired property was merely fortunate timing. Jamaal had instructed the management team to maintain normal operations and not disclose the ownership change, which was still making its way through final paperwork. Only the general manager knew that tonight's event would be taking place under the roof of a building owned by one of the guests. Following his call with Maya, Jamaal spent an hour with Dr. Saunders, the therapist who had helped him process the lingering trauma from his high school years. "Remember that your worth isn't determined by their recognition of it," Dr. Saunders emphasized. "Whether they acknowledge your success or not doesn't change what you've accomplished." "I understand that intellectually," Jamaal admitted. "But there's still a part of me that wants to see the look on their faces." "That's perfectly human," the therapist assured him. "The important thing is that you're approaching this with awareness. Your primary goal isn't to humiliate but to create accountability. That distinction matters." Their session concluded with breathing techniques to manage any anxiety that might arise during the evening. Jamaal felt centered as he thanked Dr. Saunders and prepared for his next appointment, a final strategy meeting with Terrence Hamilton. They met at Terrence's office, a warm space filled with African art and photographs documenting his journey as a black entrepreneur. Among the images was a picture of Terrence and Jamaal at Urban Mobility's first official launch event, both beaming with pride. "I've been thinking about tonight," Terrence began after they settled into comfortable chairs. "This confrontation isn't just about your personal history with Darnell. It represents something larger." "How so?" Jamaal asked, though he suspected he knew where Terrence was heading. "Every black professional has encountered versions of what you experienced at Westlake. The diminishment, the assumptions of inadequacy, the shocked expressions when we demonstrate excellence. Tonight, you're walking back into a space that once tried to convince you that you didn't belong, but you're doing it as someone who has created belonging for others." Jamaal nodded, feeling the weight of that responsibility. "It's not just about proving Darnell wrong. It's about challenging the system he represents." "Exactly," Terrence confirmed. "But remember that true impact isn't measured by how dramatically you expose him. It's measured by the change your actions create afterward." This perspective solidified Jamaal's approach. He wasn't interested in a scene that would provide momentary satisfaction but no lasting change. His goal was substantive accountability that would protect communities from Fletcher Development's discriminatory practices. Following his meeting with Terrence, Jamaal connected with several other former Westlake students who had experienced similar treatment. While researching the reunion, he had discovered that he wasn't Darnell's only target. Several other scholarship students and students of color had endured comparable harassment, and a few had achieved significant success despite these obstacles. Zara Williams, now a prominent civil rights attorney, had been excluded from study groups and mock trial teams despite her obvious talent. Trevor Jackson, currently a neurosurgical resident at Johns Hopkins, had faced constant insinuations that his academic achievements were due to lowered standards. Both had declined their reunion invitations until hearing from Jamaal. "I never planned to set foot in a room with those people again," Zara admitted during their video call. "But what you're proposing isn't about rehashing old wounds. It's about preventing new ones. Count me in." By early afternoon, Jamaal's preparation shifted to the practical. He visited his tailor for a final fitting of his suit, a perfectly cut charcoal gray Tom Ford with subtle blue undertones. The choice was deliberate. Elegant and obviously expensive to the knowledgeable eye, but not flashy or attention-seeking. "This accomplishes exactly what we discussed," the tailor commented as he made minute adjustments. "It communicates success without shouting about it." Next came a visit to his barber, Anthony, who had been cutting his hair since college days. "Big night, huh?" Anthony asked as Jamaal settled into the chair. "You could say that," Jamaal replied with a slight smile. "High school reunion. Ah, going back to show them who's boss now." Anthony chuckled as he draped the cape around Jamaal's shoulders. "Something like that. Though it's complicated." Anthony nodded knowingly as he began the precise work of a fade. "Always is. But sometimes people need to see what they missed out on by judging too quick." After leaving the barbershop, Jamaal stopped by his mother's house. LaShonda Washington was in her garden, tending to the rosebushes that had become her passion since retirement. "You look handsome," she observed, removing her gardening gloves to straighten his collar in a gesture that transported them both back to his school days. "How are you feeling about tonight?" "Ready," Jamaal answered honestly. "Not excited, not anxious. Just, ready." "Good," she nodded approvingly. "Remember who you are. Not who they thought you were, not even who you've become on paper. Who you are in your heart." Before leaving, Jamaal shared a meal with her, a simple but delicious spread of the comfort foods she had prepared throughout his childhood. This grounding ritual connected him to his roots, a reminder that success hadn't changed the core values she had instilled. As evening approached, Jamaal returned to his apartment to make final preparations. He reviewed the contents of the envelope he would carry, meticulously organized evidence of Fletcher Development's discriminatory practices, including sworn statements from affected residents, copies of citations for violations, and financial records showing patterns of predatory behavior. His phone buzzed with a message from Maya confirming that everything was in place at the venue. The hotel staff had been briefed on the authorized changes to the ballroom setup. The audio-visual equipment had been tested. The security team was aware that Jamaal and his associates would arrive early. At precisely 6:30 p.m., an hour before the reunion's official start time, Jamaal stood before his mirror making a final assessment. The man who looked back at him bore little resemblance to the uncertain teenager who had endured Westlake Academy's hostile environment. His posture conveyed confidence without arrogance. His expression reflected determination tempered by compassion. "This isn't about the past," he reminded himself quietly. "It's about creating a better future." With that clarity of purpose, Jamaal Washington left his apartment and stepped into the waiting car. The driver, a participant in Urban Mobility's community driver program, greeted him warmly. "Special night, Mr. Washington?" he asked, noting the formal attire. "Yes," Jamaal replied, settling into the back seat. "I'm going to revisit my past to help secure a better future." As they pulled away from the curb, Jamaal glanced at his phone one last time. A message from Terrence had arrived moments earlier. "Remember, true power isn't about domination. It's about transformation." With those words in mind, Jamaal began the journey to confront not just Darnell Fletcher, but the systems of privilege and discrimination that had shaped both their paths. A hush fell over the ballroom as Jamaal approached the podium. The confident stride and purposeful expression of the man moving across the room bore little resemblance to the hesitant scholarship student most attendees remembered from Westlake Academy. Even those who had interacted with him earlier in the evening sensed that something significant had shifted. "Good evening," Jamaal began, his voice clear and measured. For those who don't remember me, I'm Jamaal Washington. Westlake class of 2018. Scholarship student. The one many of you called, charity case, behind my back, and sometimes to my face. The direct acknowledgement of his former status created an immediate tension in the room. Several attendees shifted uncomfortably in their seats, while others exchanged guilty glances. I wasn't originally planning to speak tonight, he continued. But recent conversations suggested there might be value in sharing a different perspective on success than what we've heard so far. From his position near the bar, Darnell Fletcher watched with narrowing eyes, the whiskey in his hand momentarily forgotten as he processed this unexpected development. 5 years ago, at our graduation, someone told me that some people were headed to Ivy League schools with their parents' connections, while others like me would be lucky to get jobs at gas stations. Jamaal didn't need to identify Darnell specifically, the memory was clear to anyone who had witnessed that interaction. It was meant to be the final word on my potential. A reminder of my place. The screens behind Jamaal transitioned to show the original sketch of what would become Urban Mobility's platform, notes and diagrams drawn on notebook paper during his community college days. What that assessment missed was that perspective can be an advantage. Growing up with transportation challenges in South Atlanta gave me insights that privileged backgrounds couldn't provide. Where some saw only problems, I saw possibilities. The presentation shifted to show Urban Mobility's current interface, displaying real-time transportation solutions connecting underserved communities to employment centers, healthcare facilities, and educational institutions. Today, Urban Mobility operates in 23 cities across the United States. We've facilitated over 12 million rides, helped 70,000 people access jobs they couldn't otherwise reach, and partnered with major healthcare systems to reduce missed appointments by 38% in communities with limited transportation options. Murmurs spread through the audience as recognition dawned. Several former classmates pulled out phones, quickly searching for information about the company being displayed. Our most recent valuation placed the company at just over $100 million, Jamaal stated matter-of-factly, not as a boast but as context for what would follow. I remain the majority shareholder. The ripple effect was immediate. Expressions of shock, disbelief, and belated respect moved across the room like a wave. Darnell's face had gone rigid, his knuckles white around his whiskey glass. But I'm not here to talk about valuation or venture capital rounds, Jamaal continued. I'm here to talk about how success is measured, and how opportunity is distributed. The screens changed again, displaying a map of Atlanta with overlays showing transportation deserts, predominantly in neighborhoods with high percentages of Black and Latino residents. These are the communities most transportation companies ignore, the same communities where predatory development practices create displacement and economic hardship. For the first time, Jamaal's gaze fixed directly on Darnell, the implication clear to anyone familiar with Fletcher Development's projects. When companies enter these neighborhoods not to serve residents but to replace them, we perpetuate the very inequities many of us experienced at institutions like Westlake. The faces change, but the exclusion remains the same. The presentation shifted to specific examples, before and after images of neighborhoods where Fletcher Development had acquired properties, followed by data showing displacement patterns of long-term residents, primarily people of color. Fletcher Development Group has specialized in what they call neighborhood revitalization, Jamaal explained, his tone measured but unflinching. What their marketing materials don't show is that these projects typically result in a 90% displacement rate for existing residents, with negligible relocation assistance. Darnell pushed away from the bar, moving toward the podium with a thunderous expression. This is completely inappropriate. This reunion isn't a platform for your political agenda or business rivalries. Jamaal remained composed as Darnell approached. This isn't about politics, Darnell. It's about patterns. The same patterns of exclusion and discrimination that were present at Westlake have followed some of us into the business world. The screens now displayed specific citations issued to Fletcher Development for fair housing violations, along with court documents from discrimination suits that had been quietly settled. 7 separate citations for violating the Fair Housing Act in the past 3 years, Jamaal noted. 43% higher rates for identical loan applications from Black and Latino clients compared to white applicants with similar financial profiles. These aren't opinions. They're documented facts. Darnell reached the edge of the stage, his voice low but intense. You need to stop this right now. You have no idea what you're talking about, and my father's attorneys will. Will what, Darnell? Jamaal asked, his composure unshaken. Dispute documented evidence. Challenge legally obtained public records. Or perhaps they'll claim that pointing out discrimination is worse than practicing it. By now, the entire room was transfixed by the confrontation. Former classmates who had never given much thought to housing discrimination or transportation equity found themselves unable to look away from the unfolding drama. You wanted a showcase of success, Jamaal continued, addressing the broader audience rather than just Darnell. But what does success mean? Is it just personal wealth accumulation, or is it creating systems that offer others the opportunities we were fortunate enough to receive? The presentation shifted again, this time showing the Washington Mobility Foundation scholarship recipients, young people from underserved communities pursuing degrees in urban planning, transportation engineering, and related fields. Each year, we invest in students who, like I once was, are told their potential has limits based on their background. The difference is that we don't expect them to navigate institutional discrimination alone. At this point, Zara Williams and Trevor Jackson joined Jamaal at the podium, creating a visual representation of success that challenged the narrative Darnell had presented earlier. Dr. Trevor Jackson is now a neurosurgical resident at Johns Hopkins, Jamaal introduced. Zara Williams is a housing rights attorney whose work has prevented thousands of discriminatory evictions. We were all scholarship students at Westlake. All told we didn't belong. All proved otherwise. Darnell, realizing the public confrontation was only making him appear worse, attempted a different approach. This is ancient history, Jamaal. If you felt mistreated at Westlake, that's unfortunate, but dragging up the past serves no purpose. We were kids. This isn't about the past, Jamaal corrected him. It's about the present. The same discriminatory attitudes that made Westlake hostile for scholarship students are reflected in business practices that harm vulnerable communities today. The difference is that now, some of us are in positions to challenge those practices. The envelope Jamaal had carried all evening now appeared in his hand. This contains additional documentation of Fletcher Development's violations of fair housing laws, discriminatory lending practices, and environmental regulations selectively ignored in predominantly Black neighborhoods. Copies have been provided to relevant regulatory agencies and investigative journalists. Darnell's face paled as he realized the extent of Jamaal's preparation. You can't do this. My father. Your father built a company that could have genuinely improved communities, Jamaal interrupted. Instead, it became another tool for displacement and discrimination. But it doesn't have to continue that way. The screen shifted to show a final slide, a proposed community benefits agreement that outlined specific changes Fletcher Development could implement to address its discriminatory practices and contribute to genuine community development. This isn't about revenge, Darnell. It's about transformation. Fletcher Development has the resources and position to become a leader in equitable development. The question is whether it has the will to change. For a moment, the entire ballroom remained suspended in tension. Former classmates who had come expecting superficial reminiscence found themselves witnessing a fundamental challenge to systems many had never questioned. Teachers who had dismissed Jamaal's potential now saw evidence of not just individual success but systemic impact. Darnell's father, Bradley Fletcher, who had been observing from the back of the room during his son's presentation, now moved forward. Unlike Darnell's angry approach, the elder Fletcher moved with the calculated precision of someone accustomed to navigating business crises. Mr. Washington, he addressed Jamaal directly, his tone carefully controlled. I think this conversation would be more productive in private. I disagree, Mr. Fletcher, Jamaal replied respectfully but firmly. The discrimination we're discussing hasn't happened in private. Its impacts haven't been private. The conversation about changing those patterns shouldn't be private either. The elder Fletcher's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. You've made serious allegations about my company. Allegations that could have significant repercussions if broadcast without proper context. Every allegation is supported by documentation, Jamaal responded, gesturing to the envelope. I'm not interested in damaging Fletcher development. I'm interested in seeing it become part of the solution rather than perpetuating the problem. A tense silence followed, broken by an unexpected voice from the audience. I think we should listen to what Jamaal is proposing, said Mrs. Harrington, the former English teacher who had consistently underestimated his academic abilities. If we taught anything of value at Westlake, it should have been the importance of confronting uncomfortable truths. This intervention seemed to shift the energy in the room. Other voices joined in, some expressing surprise at the revelations, others acknowledging that they had benefited from systems of privilege without questioning them. Recognizing the changing dynamics, Bradley Fletcher adopted a more conciliatory tone. Perhaps we could discuss your proposed agreement in detail. Fletcher Development is always open to community feedback. I'd welcome that conversation, Jamaal agreed. But it needs to include representatives from the communities most affected by your development practices. Their voices matter most in this discussion. As the formal presentation concluded, the ballroom buzzed with conversations far more substantive than the superficial networking that had dominated earlier. Former classmates approached Jamaal, Zara, and Trevor with questions that reflected genuine interest rather than performative inclusion. The confrontation had evolved beyond a personal reckoning between Jamaal and Darnell. It had become a catalyst for broader reflection on privilege, opportunity, and responsibility, themes far removed from the self-congratulatory showcase Darnell had planned. As the evening wound down, Jamaal found himself in a corner of the ballroom with Darnell and Bradley Fletcher, away from the main crowd. The dynamic between them had shifted dramatically from the beginning of the night. You could have approached us privately, Darnell said, his earlier anger now tempered with grudging respect. You didn't have to do this. Would you have listened? Jamaal asked simply. The lack of response was answer enough. The proposal I've outlined would position Fletcher Development as a leader in equitable development, Jamaal continued, addressing the elder Fletcher. It's not just ethical, it's good business in a changing market. Bradley Fletcher studied Jamaal with the calculating gaze of someone reassessing an underestimated opponent. You've built something impressive, Mr. Washington. Not many people could have done what you've accomplished, starting from where you did. That's precisely my point, Jamaal replied. Talent and potential exist everywhere. Opportunity doesn't. The question is whether we perpetuate that imbalance or work to correct it. As they parted ways, Darnell extended his hand, not with the patronizing smirk of earlier but with a complexity of expression that suggested the beginning of a profound recalibration. Jamaal accepted the handshake, neither vindictive in victory nor submissive in reconciliation. Equal at last, if only in this moment. The confrontation had not ended with humiliation or triumph as many might have expected. Instead, it had opened a door to something potentially more valuable, the possibility of genuine change. The ballroom had nearly emptied by the time Jamaal gathered his materials from the podium. What had been planned as a standard high school reunion had transformed into something far more consequential, a reckoning not just with personal histories but with ongoing systems of privilege and discrimination. That wasn't exactly what I expected when I decided to attend this reunion, Trevor commented as he helped Jamaal collect the presentation documents. I thought we'd make our point and leave. Instead, it feels like something significant just happened. It's what happens next that matters, Jamaal replied, carefully returning the evidence folder to his briefcase. Revelations without follow-through rarely create lasting change. As they spoke, small groups of former classmates lingered near the exits, conversations continuing with an intensity absent from earlier small talk. Several approached Jamaal with business cards and contact information, expressions combining embarrassment about the past with genuine interest in his current work. "I never realized how transportation affects economic opportunity," admitted Kevin Palmer, who had been peripheral to Darnell's circle at Westlake. "My company's having issues with employee retention in our Atlanta office. I wonder if transportation barriers might be part of the problem." Similar exchanges occurred with other alumni, suggesting that the evening's confrontation had sparked genuine reflection. Even some who had actively participated in Jamaal's high school isolation now sought to understand perspectives they had previously dismissed. "Mr. Washington?" A hotel staff member approached discreetly. "There are several reporters in the lobby asking to speak with you. They mentioned something about an educational initiative." The timing was precisely as planned. Maya had arranged for journalists to arrive at this hour, ostensibly to cover the Washington Mobility Foundation's new scholarship program. Their presence offered Jamaal the opportunity to transform a private confrontation into public accountability. "Please tell them I'll be available shortly," Jamaal instructed, exchanging meaningful glances with Zara and Trevor. The next phase of their strategy was unfolding as intended. In the marble-floored lobby, representatives from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, NPR's local affiliate, and several online publications waited with recording equipment and notebooks. Maya had provided them with press kits about the Foundation's scholarship initiative, but Jamaal's presentation had created an unexpected additional angle. "Mr. Washington, we understand your foundation is announcing a major educational initiative," began a reporter from the Journal-Constitution. "But we're also hearing about some concerning development practices that were discussed at tonight's event." "The two issues are connected," Jamaal explained, his tone measured and factual rather than accusatory. "The Washington Mobility Foundation's scholarships address barriers to educational and economic opportunity. Those barriers include both transportation limitations and housing displacement caused by certain development practices." Without directly attacking Fletcher development, Jamaal outlined the documented patterns of discrimination and their impacts on vulnerable communities. He emphasized that the goal wasn't to vilify specific companies but to create accountability and pathways to more equitable practices. "This isn't about assigning blame," he clarified. "It's about recognizing patterns that perpetuate inequality and working collectively to change them." As the interviews progressed, Jamaal noticed several former classmates listening attentively from the periphery. Among them was Tiffany Adams, the reunion organizer, whose expression suggested she was processing the evening's events in a new light. When the formal interviews concluded, Tiffany approached hesitantly. "I owe you an apology," she began, her typical confidence subdued. "Not just for tonight, but for Westlake. I never actively participated in what Darnell and others did, but I never spoke against it either. I told myself that made me neutral, but silence isn't neutrality when someone's being harmed." "Thank you for acknowledging that," Jamaal replied, appreciating the genuine nature of her reflection. "But rather than focusing on personal guilt, I'd encourage you to consider how your current position could address similar patterns. I understand you're now on Westlake's alumni board." Tiffany nodded, her expression shifting from remorse to consideration. "The scholarship program still exists, but it's underfunded and offers minimal support beyond tuition. The students face many of the same challenges you did. Perhaps that's something we could discuss improving," Jamaal suggested. "The foundation has experience developing comprehensive support systems for scholarship students." Similar conversations occurred throughout the lobby as former classmates who had remained silent during Jamaal's high school struggles now expressed belated recognition of their complicity. While some approaches seemed motivated more by networking opportunities than genuine remorse, others reflected authentic realization of past failures. Bradley Fletcher, who had exited shortly after the confrontation in the ballroom, returned to the hotel as the interviews were concluding. His expression was unreadable as he observed the scene from across the lobby, Jamaal at the center of attention, speaking with authority on issues Fletcher development had long avoided addressing publicly. When the elder Fletcher approached, the surrounding conversations quieted, creating an inadvertent spotlight for this unexpected interaction. "Mr. Washington, I believe we have more to discuss," he stated without preamble. "Perhaps my office tomorrow morning would be appropriate." "I appreciate the invitation," Jamaal replied evenly. But as I mentioned earlier, any meaningful discussion needs to include representatives from the affected communities. I'd be happy to facilitate those connections if you're genuinely interested in addressing the concerns raised tonight. A flash of annoyance crossed Bradley Fletcher's face before being replaced by calculated consideration. Very well. My assistant will contact you to arrange a meeting with appropriate stakeholders present. Before departing, Fletcher added something unexpected: your mother must be very proud of what you've accomplished. The comment caught Jamaal momentarily off guard. It wasn't clear whether Fletcher intended it as a genuine acknowledgement or a subtle reminder that he knew about Jamaal's background. Either way, Jamaal's response was measured. She is. And she taught me that true success isn't measured by what you accumulate but by what you contribute. As the elder Fletcher departed, Darnell remained behind, his earlier bravado noticeably diminished. The reunion that was supposed to showcase his success and reinforce his position had instead revealed the fragility of privilege built on discrimination. Was this your plan all along? He asked Jamaal when they found themselves momentarily alone near the hotel's grand staircase. To publicly humiliate me in my father's company? No, Jamaal answered honestly. My original plan was to decline your invitation and continue focusing on my work. But when I realized Fletcher development was actively harming communities similar to where I grew up, I couldn't remain silent. So this isn't about what happened at Westlake? Darnell's tone suggested he found this difficult to believe. What happened at Westlake and what's happening now are connected, Jamaal explained. The same attitudes that made you believe I didn't belong there make it possible to displace entire communities without consideration for their humanity or rights. It's not about personal revenge, Darnell. It's about breaking patterns that harm people. Darnell absorbed this with a complexity of expression Jamaal had never witnessed during their school days, a mixture of defensiveness, confusion, and reluctant realization. My father built everything from nothing, he finally said, though the usual pride in his voice had been replaced by something more questioning. He always taught me that business is business, and sentiment has no place in development decisions. And does that perspective serve the communities where you develop? Or just your bottom line? Jamaal asked, not accusingly but inviting genuine reflection. Before Darnell could respond, they were interrupted by the arrival of several other former classmates, eager to exchange contact information with Jamaal before departing. The moment of potential breakthrough dissolved into the social obligations of the evening. As the night concluded, Jamaal found himself standing in the hotel lobby with Zara and Trevor, reflecting on outcomes none of them had fully anticipated. Do you think anything will actually change with Fletcher development? Trevor asked skeptically. Maybe, maybe not, Jamaal acknowledged. But what matters is that we've created visibility and accountability where there was none before. The journalists have documentation. Community advocates are now connected with decision makers. The patterns can't continue in darkness. Zara nodded in agreement. And beyond Fletcher specifically, you forced a lot of people to confront their own complicity tonight, both in what happened at Westlake and in the systems they participate in now. The following morning brought unexpected developments. Local news outlets ran stories about both the Washington Mobility Foundation Scholarship Initiative and the allegations regarding Fletcher Development's discriminatory practices. Social media buzzed with commentary from reunion attendees, many expressing support for addressing long-standing inequities in Atlanta's development landscape. More surprising was an email from Bradley Fletcher requesting a formal meeting with Jamaal and representatives from communities affected by Fletcher development projects. The message struck a tone between reluctant acknowledgement and strategic damage control, but it represented an opening that hadn't existed before. It's a start, Terrence observed when Jamaal forwarded him the email. Probably motivated more by PR concerns than genuine conversion, but change often begins with self-interest before evolving into something more meaningful. What do you think about how Jamaal handled this confrontation? Comment number 1 if you believe he struck the perfect balance between accountability and opportunity for change. Comment number 2 if you think he should have taken a more aggressive approach with the evidence he had. Like this video if you appreciate how he transformed personal success into systemic impact rather than just seeking revenge, and subscribe to follow more stories about justice and redemption. 6 months after the reunion, Jamaal Washington stood in the auditorium of Westlake Academy, a space that once represented anxiety and exclusion but now served as the venue for something transformative. Behind him, a banner proclaimed, Washington Mobility Foundation Scholarship Program, Building Pathways to Opportunity. The audience was a striking contrast to his graduation ceremony 5 years earlier. Instead of predominantly wealthy white families, the rows were filled with a diverse crowd, community members from South Atlanta, current Westlake students, educators, business leaders, and notably, several executives from Fletcher Development Group. Education should be a bridge to opportunity, not a barrier, Jamaal began, addressing the assembled crowd. But that bridge needs structural support, transportation access, housing stability, mentorship, and genuine inclusion. Today, we're not just launching scholarships. We're creating a comprehensive support system for students whose potential often goes unrecognized. From his position at the podium, Jamaal could see his mother in the front row, tears of pride glistening in her eyes. Beside her sat Terrence Hamilton, whose belief in Jamaal's vision had helped make this moment possible. Several rows back, more surprisingly, sat Darnell Fletcher and his father, their expressions attentive rather than dismissive. The 6 months following the reunion had brought unexpected developments in Jamaal's ongoing engagement with his former classmates. Some had quickly retreated to comfortable distance after the initial shock of confrontation faded. Others had maintained contact, genuinely interested in understanding perspectives they had previously ignored. Tiffany Adams had proven particularly committed to transformation, leveraging her position on Westlake's alumni board to advocate for more substantial support systems for scholarship students. Working with Jamaal's foundation, she had helped design mentorship programs connecting current students with alumni who understood their challenges. Most significant, however, was the evolution in Fletcher Development's practices. The initial meeting requested by Bradley Fletcher had indeed taken place, with community representatives present as Jamaal had insisted. While skepticism had dominated both sides of the table at first, the documented evidence of discriminatory patterns had proven difficult to dismiss. "We can fight these allegations in court and the press," Terrence had advised the elder Fletcher privately after that first tense meeting. "Or you can become a leader in equitable development and enhance both your legacy and your profit margins. The market is shifting toward responsible investment." Whether motivated by conscience, calculation, or a combination of both, Bradley Fletcher had ultimately committed to substantive changes. Fletcher Development had hired a chief equity officer, revised lending practices to eliminate racial disparities, and established a community benefits agreement for all new projects that included affordable housing requirements and displacement protection. Darnell's personal journey had been more complex. Initial defensiveness had gradually given way to reluctant reflection, particularly as business realities made clear that his father's company needed to adapt to changing expectations. His involvement in implementing the new policies had begun as mere compliance but evolved into something approaching genuine engagement. "While we can't undo historical inequities overnight," Jamaal continued in his presentation, "we can create systems that stop perpetuating them." The students receiving these inaugural scholarships represent not just individual potential but our collective future. On the screen behind him appeared photographs of the first cohort of scholarship recipients, 10 brilliant young people from backgrounds similar to Jamaal's own. Unlike his experience, however, these students would receive not just financial assistance but comprehensive support including transportation solutions, housing security, professional mentorship, and social inclusion programming. Each recipient will receive full tuition support, transportation assistance through urban mobility, guaranteed stable housing through our partnership with equitable development firms, and mentorship from professionals who have navigated similar journeys. A murmur of appreciation moved through the audience at the comprehensive nature of the program. Among the partners listed on the screen was Fletcher Development Group, whose contribution included both financial support and guaranteed affordable housing units near the school. "This partnership represents more than charitable giving," Jamaal acknowledged, nodding toward the Fletcher executives. It demonstrates how businesses can align profit with purpose when they genuinely engage with community needs. Following the formal presentation, Jamaal moved through the reception, connecting with scholarship recipients and their families. The joy and determination in their expressions reminded him powerfully of his own mother's pride when he had received his Westlake acceptance letter years earlier. "Mr. Washington." A hesitant voice interrupted his conversations. Jamaal turned to find Deshaun Harris, one of the scholarship recipients, a brilliant young mathematician from Jamaal's old neighborhood. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course," Jamaal replied, leading the young man to a quieter corner of the reception. "Everyone keeps talking about how amazing this opportunity is, and I'm grateful, but..." Deshaun hesitated, searching for words. "I'm worried about belonging here. The other day during my campus tour, some students made comments about scholarship cases and how we're only here to fill diversity quotas." The familiar pain of those experiences resonated deeply with Jamaal. Rather than offering placating reassurances, he acknowledged the reality of the challenge. "Those attitudes exist," he confirmed. "And I'd be lying if I said navigating them will be easy. But you have something I didn't have, a support system designed by people who understand exactly what you're facing. You're not alone in this journey." Jamaal explained the mentorship component of the scholarship, connecting Deshaun with successful professionals who had faced similar barriers. He detailed the community-building events designed to create genuine inclusion rather than tokenization. Most importantly, he shared his own experiences honestly, neither sugarcoating the difficulties nor allowing them to overshadow the opportunities. "Success isn't about proving them wrong," Jamaal advised. "It's about defining achievement on your own terms and creating pathways for others to follow." As their conversation concluded, Jamaal noticed Darnell Fletcher observing from a distance. The man who had once been the primary architect of Jamaal's high school exclusion now approached with an expression far removed from his former arrogance. "That was a good thing you did there," Darnell commented, nodding toward Deshaun as the young man rejoined his family. "Telling him the truth instead of pretending it'll be easy. Truth is more empowering than false reassurance," Jamaal replied simply. An awkward silence stretched between them, filled with the weight of their shared history and dramatically different perspectives. "I've been thinking a lot about Westlake," Darnell finally admitted. "About the kind of person I was then. The things I thought were just jokes or normal competition. And..." Jamaal prompted when Darnell hesitated. "And I'm starting to understand they were neither. That what felt like maintaining the natural social order to me was active harm to others." The admission clearly didn't come easily. "Working on the community benefits agreements these past months has changed how I see things." Jamaal nodded, neither absolving Darnell of responsibility nor rejecting the genuine, if belated, recognition. "The question is what you do with that understanding moving forward," he suggested. "That's partly why I'm here," Darnell explained. "I've been speaking with Westlake's administration about creating bias awareness training for current students. The kind of program that might have made me question my behavior back then." The initiative was unexpected but aligned with the broader pattern of change catalyzed by the reunion confrontation. Several former classmates had initiated similar reflective actions in their professional and personal spheres, suggesting that the impact extended beyond Fletcher Development's policy changes. As the event concluded, Jamaal found himself standing center stage with the scholarship recipients, their families, and representatives from partner organizations, including Darnell and his father. The photograph capturing this moment would later appear in local media with the caption, "Building New Bridges, Washington Foundation Transforms Educational Access." The journey from excluded scholarship student to catalyst for systemic change had not followed a path Jamaal could have imagined when he graduated from Westlake 5 years earlier. His success hadn't been achieved to prove his tormentors wrong, it had been built by recognizing that the patterns that had made his educational journey unnecessarily difficult continued to affect countless others. True success, Jamaal had come to understand, wasn't measured by personal vindication but by creating opportunities that transformed systems of exclusion into pathways of access. The most meaningful revenge against discrimination wasn't personal triumph but collective liberation. In the auditorium where he had once felt invisible, Jamaal Washington now stood as a visible reminder that success could be redefined, not as individual achievement despite barriers, but as the collaborative dismantling of those barriers for all who followed. What do you think about Jamaal's journey from outcast to changemaker? Would you have handled the situation the same way if you were in his position? Comment your thoughts below. If this story about turning success into positive change touched you, please give it a like to help others find it. Subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories of resilience, justice, and transformation. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder that true success means creating opportunities for others. Thank you for watching, and remember, your past challenges don't determine your future impact, they prepare you for it. ## lessons from this story. Jamaal's journey teaches us that true success isn't measured by wealth or status, but by the positive impact we create in the world. When faced with discrimination, he didn't let bitterness define him. Instead, he channeled his experiences into building solutions that address systemic inequalities. His confrontation with Darnell wasn't about humiliation or revenge, but about accountability and transformation. The story reminds us that privilege often blinds people to the barriers others face. Darnell and his classmates couldn't see their own advantages or how their actions harmed others. Yet, when confronted with evidence and given the opportunity to change, some were capable of growth and reflection. Perhaps most importantly, Jamaal shows us that breaking cycles of discrimination requires more than individual success. It demands using our platforms and resources to create pathways for others. His scholarship program didn't just provide financial support but addressed the comprehensive barriers that prevent talented students from thriving. The most powerful response to prejudice isn't proving individual worth but dismantling the systems that question anyone's worthiness based on their background. True justice isn't about revenge but about creating equitable opportunities for everyone. What experience in your life has taught you the most about overcoming adversity? Share your story in the comments below. Your journey might inspire someone facing similar challenges right now. If this story about confronting racism and creating positive change resonated with you, please hit that like button to help others find it. Subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories that highlight resilience in the face of discrimination and injustice. Have you ever had to confront someone who underestimated you? How did you handle it? Drop a comment with your experience. We can all learn from each other's approaches to difficult conversations. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder that success isn't just about personal achievement but about lifting others as you rise. Sometimes our most painful experiences become our greatest sources of purpose. Thank you for watching, and remember, your worth isn't determined by others' perceptions, and your greatest revenge against discrimination is creating a more equitable world for everyone.